Hello, BookTube. Welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and today I'm talking about my Maybe Midrash TBR. So, Maybe Midrash was created by Jason over at Old Blues Chapter and Verse. I think this is the second year that it's being done, and essentially what his challenge is to read two books, one fiction, one nonfiction, that deal with religion seriously. Or at the very least, approach those books in a serious manner, even if the books aren't entirely serious. And I do have a strong interest in religion. I am not religious myself. Um, you know, Steve Donahue, I believe, might also be co-hosting this event, and his videos were certainly entertaining last week when he was introducing the maybe midrash, and he describes himself as a hard atheist, and I pretty much right in that camp. I grew up in a fairly relaxed Catholic setting. My mother would take take me to church on like certain holidays. I did go to CCD catechism, at least up through my communion. But really, I started having doubts, especially probably around middle schools where the cracks started forming. I remember after communion, the first time we went to church again, and I got to go to the communion, and my mother was still sitting in the pew, and I asked her, why aren't you coming with me? She said, oh, well, she didn't finish her communion because they had to move and they would have had to restart CCD or whatever reason there was. But I was automatically thought it was weird that I could go and get the Eucharist and my mother couldn't. I think that was one of the earliest things that occurred. But my kind of journey away from faith, it coincided also with my love of horror in a lot of ways. I had considered very briefly going into the priesthood when I was younger. This was like the year after my communion. I went to church and my cousin was getting communion. And I remember being in the pew, and my grandfather was in the pew in front of me. And on the back of his seat, that's usually where the books are and everything, there were pamphlets about joining the priesthood. And I had just picked one up, idly, just to read it, because I think I was just spacing out and was bored. And my grandpa turned around and saw me reading it. And he said, are you thinking about joining the priesthood? I think I just kind of gave a non-committal stare. And he said, oh, good, that's a good thing. And he turned around again, so I kind of had renewed interest in this pamphlet. And I remember looking at the priest who was giving the service and all the people listening to him. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is an interesting job this guy has. But then my mind immediately went to all the horror films that I had seen, where whenever somebody had a demon possession or they needed their house cleansed, who do they call? Yeah, the priest, right? Maybe that's what I could do. I could become a priest, and I could, help people out with their demon infestations and everything. So I was probably, I must have been maybe like 11 years old or something at that point, and maybe even 10. So that kind of got a certain interest in me. And my grandmother, she knew that I was interested in ghost stories and everything else, so she would clip out magazine articles and newspaper articles about hauntings. And I didn't know then that these were basically from like the National Enquirer and whatever kind of like tabloid rags that she was reading. I thought they were just like legit newspaper articles. I had no idea. So I took that stuff pretty seriously. So then I started reading about it. I started reading about religion, reading the Bible, and that's when things started going downhill for me. I started realizing that I didn't believe this. I wasn't jiving with any of this. None of this stuff really sounded real to me. And then I learned the word aesthetic. And I remember going to look for it in the dictionary. And I came across atheist. And I read that definition. And it hadn't occurred to me that that was an option to not believe in God until I read that. And immediately when I read that word, I knew that that was me. And this is before the whole new atheist movement and everything else. So I was a very young skeptic. Certainly by the time I was in high school, I knew that I didn't believe in any of it. And it did make up a big part of my identity. I had many interesting conversations and confrontations sometimes with believers. Some that maybe I'll share in the future. Um, some interesting ones, and not me being an aggressor at all. But a lot of reminders that I was certainly a minority in my disbelief, which goes to one of the choices that I'm going to be choosing for maybe Midrash. Um, so yeah, ever since then, I've really identified a secular humanist, agnostic atheist. I mean, however you want to say it. I am a hard atheist. It's not that I just don't believe. I do not think that there are any gods. Um, I do have some sympathies for religion, mostly in terms of ritual. I have a difficult time with faith. Um, just the idea of faith, of believing uh, in a higher power without evidence. I do have some skepticism as far as uh, how good religion is for the world. So I'll be very open about that right up front. However, I do see value in certain ritual. I do have a certain attraction to, even though I'm very secularist, just naturally, not just by principle. Just I'm a naturally secular person. Um, I do see value in things like the mythopoetic, or to have certain rituals to focus our minds on certain aspects, right? And I've even looked into that myself, and I've considered adopting certain actual atheo-pagan uh, like holidays into my life. Not because I feel the need for there will be no prayer, but I feel the need to trick myself into thinking about things that I want to give more attention to, like the changing of the seasons, like nature, like thinking about my ancestors, or talking about my grandparents more with my children. Things that I always want to do, but then time goes by and you forget, and you realize that you haven't done it in such a long time. And I thought that, I do have a certain affinity for certain, especially like Norse paganism, um, with the mythology, with what I've read about the actual religious practices. So I have played around with the idea of adopting certain Norse atheo-pagan, that's atheist and pagan, a non-believer, um, into my life. So I do see value in certain rituals and practices. It's faith, and also thought crime is how I would refer to whether or not you believe could be punishment. I have a real hard time with that, and that's something that I'm not so forgiving of. So just to let people know where I'm coming from with this, that's where I stand. So that kind of goes at least a little bit to the first choice that I'm going to have for maybe Midrash, my nonfiction choice. And that is going to be Village Atheists: How America's Unbelievers Made Their Way in a Godly Nation by Lee Eric Schmidt. And this is from Princeton University Press. This is not old at all, right? Or 2016 that this came out. And it looks especially at the late 19th century in the United States. Um, and the idea of the village atheist, it kind of became a little bit of a cultural trope, I guess, during that time. But he essentially profiles four prominent people who represent certain aspects of being a non-believer, being an infidel in America during that time. So yes, there is the antagonistic way that happened, right? Where you have, like, especially fundamentalists against atheists, and that's certainly there. But he also, from what I understand, goes into the more blurred aspect, the tolerance that would happen, right? Like, you might have a Baptist minister living next to a proclaimed infidel, and they still get along. They still, they're still okay. There's a lot of tolerance sometimes for it as well. So it goes into both of those. And I'm really interested in seeing what life was like for non-believers during this era. So yeah, this is my nonfiction pick. So I'm looking forward to this. And then I have a couple of fictional picks. Okay. The first one is William Peter Blatty's Legion. This is the sequel to The Exorcist. And even though I am certainly a very secular person, and even though I'm a avowed horror fan, I will say that exorcism, even slash possession films, are one of my least favorite subgenres of horror, except for The Exorcist. I love The Exorcist. It is one of my all-time favorite films, horror or otherwise. I think that it is just a brilliant film. And I like the novel too, also. I think that Blatty is excellent at writing those characters, complicated characters. Um, and what I really appreciate is I think that there is a valid humanist interpretation to The Exorcist. And Blatty does not use the possession of young Reagan McNeil, as just a mouthpiece for trying to get people to convert, which I don't like. It's not manipulative at all in that way. He lets the characters stay true to themselves. Even though he was a believer, he was Catholic. He believed in demons and possession and exorcisms. This was not all fiction for him. William Friedkin, who did the film adaptation, he was a skeptic. He didn't necessarily believe. But one of the things that I really respected about Blatty in The Exorcist, and this is kind of minor spoiler, but I mean, if you don't know what The Exorcist is, I don't know what to tell you. But Reagan McNeil is non-religious in the beginning of The Exorcist. And by the end of it, she says, oh no, I believe in the devil. I've seen the devil. But she says, I don't believe in God because I still haven't seen him. And obviously, from somebody in my point of view, I can respect that that decision. But also, I respect Blatty for making that decision, for allowing that character to be that, and not have her at the very end walk out with like a nun's habit, holding a crucifix and praying to the rosary. I just really respect that fidelity to character. So I'm wondering how this is going to be. I know this focuses more on Kinderman, the detective from the first one. I have, of course, seen The Exorcist 3, which is based off of this book. Blatty did direct that, although that is also a film that had an incredible amount of studio interference. They insisted on putting an exorcism in the book. I'm sorry, not in the book, inside that movie. It's kind of retrofitted in that Blatty didn't want there. So I am wondering to see kind of what the original source material is and how Blatty handles it. And also if I like his fidelity to character as much as I did in The Exorcist. So, again, my fiction pick, my first one, is William Peter Blatty's Legion. My second one is sort of religion. I'm gonna take it that way, and that's What Dreams May Come by Richard Matheson. I do like Richard Matheson. I've read I Am Legend, The Shrinking Man, a bunch of his short stories, still some that I have to get to. But this is when he was kind of breaking away from horror in a certain way. And I've seen the film adaptation of this as well, starring Robin Williams. And it's been a long time since I've seen that movie. It's been probably over 20 years at this point, but I remember really liking it. And the reason I'm choosing this is because Matheson actually has an introduction at the beginning of this, before the novel, where he basically claims that the depictions of the afterlife are true, are real. That he researched all the different religions and what they said about the afterlife, and he's basically depicting what it is really like. So he's trying to sell this in a way that says that, this is in a certain way a religious truth. Okay, what we have here, non-denominational, non-specific as far as religion, but in terms of the afterlife, yes, there is truth derived from religion in this book. So I've always been wanting to read this and see what it's like. So I figured this would be a good time for it. So that's my second fictional pick. And I do have another category, which I think falls in between the two, fiction and nonfiction. And it won't be immediately obvious. I already started looking through the beginning, but it won't be immediately obvious why I choose something like this. But this was in my 50-plus surprise book haul. Something I would never buy on my own, honestly. But this is The Haunted, One Family's Nightmare, the harrowing true story of demonic attack and intimidation. Written by Robert Curran with Jack and Janet Smurl and Ed and Lorraine Warren. So this is a true, air quotes, true account of a family's nightmare, being haunted and beset by demons. This was made into a TV movie when I was younger, and I remember being really struck by it. So it stuck in my mind, definitely. And one of the reasons I'm choosing this for maybe Midrash, okay, is when you look at the film industry, there are very few cases, you could probably name them all in one hand, where a religiously conservative film became successful at the box office in any genre, except for, and this is where this kind of gets in, except for the horror genre, where it comes up a lot, and especially with the Conjuring universe, based upon the cases, the real life cases of Ed and Lorraine Warren. You can tell by my attitude, I do not have a lot of respect for Ed and Lorraine Warren, the late Ed and Lorraine Warren. They're no longer here. But I think that they were either overly credulous, they never walked into a house that wasn't infested by demons, or they were dishonest. And I think it was probably a mixture of the two, honestly. But the Conjuring universe has, I think, its own brand of conservatism, of religious conservatism within it, that I think often gets overlooked. And it really stems from the way Ed and Lorraine Warren were. They adhered to a much like a more traditional form of Catholicism, and that was often the the solution to your problems. Become Catholic. And this actually has an introduction. Let's see if I can find it here. The introduction here is by Bishop Robert McKenna in Monroe, Connecticut. Okay, not too far from where I live, and pretty much right down the road from my brother just bought a house. That's where the Warrens lived. They have right on here, Bishop McKenna is among the traditionalist priests and laity of the Catholic Church holding to their ancient ritual for Mass and the sacraments against the reforms of the Second Vatican Council. He has a church in Monroe, Connecticut. I am reading this especially to see how religion plays a part in this. They've already mentioned many, many times how Catholic the Smurls are, and painted them in a way that kind of makes them, remember the good old days before all those hippies were smoking dope? That's the way that the Smurls were, right? And how could something like this happen to them? So I am interested in that, and I am interested in the way that horror stories function in our society anyway, in our culture. I'm fascinated by that. Whether it be literature or movies or supposed like real life ghost hunting stuff. So what does this tell us about the way we think of ghosts and demons and everything, right? This was published in 88. I think there was a little bit of an earlier edition before then even, but this is from 88. Yeah, so that's how I'm looking at this. I'm looking at the role religion plays in the ideas of ghosts and hauntings in this, and looking at it for insight into the way those things operate within our society, because there are certainly many admirers of the Warrens still out there, and the Conjuring universe is not going away. And the new movie is going to be coming out, the whole Devil in Connecticut story, which is literally happened like right down the road from where I live. And I've talked to people who were still around during that time, when that occurred. So it's not going away. And that Conjuring Warren brand of haunting, which has a very religious, very Catholic bent, is not going away. So anyway, that's my last pick. Is it fact? Is it fiction? Is it nonfiction? I don't know. Is hoax its own category? I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm reading this. So those are my maybe Midrash picks. Okay. Not like the other. One of these not like the other. Certainly. We got The Haunted, Village Atheists, Legion, and What Dreams May Come. So that's maybe Midrash for me. A little bit of religion, a little bit of skepticism, a little bit of BS. So anyway, thank you, BookTube.